Welcome to the Out on a Limb podcast. We are all interconnected to a greater web of consciousness. Our aim is to open your mind to a new world through having open-minded discussions about what we perceive our reality to be.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Out on a Limb podcast with your hosts, Will and Allison and Samantha. And today we have another special guest for you. It's Ian Morris. Let me do a little introduction, and then I'm going to share how we know Ian, because he's been a special friend of ours for a number of years now. But Ian is an accomplished artist and the founder of Listening to Smile. He's developed a unique approach to wellness and self-discovery, the foundations of which is his trademarked frequency-minded music and the LTS method, combining healing frequencies and sounds to create a relaxing and stress-reducing experience. His work has touched countless people around the world, helping them discover their own unique path towards health and happiness. And we are privileged and honored that you're here with us today, Ian.
Oh, thank you guys so much for having me. I'm excited. It's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah.
You were just a wealth of knowledge about music and frequency and sound and healing and all of that sort of stuff. And it's a topic that we haven't really covered too much on our podcast yet. So we have a lot of things to dive into.
Though we've alluded to it, I've alluded to it. I've mentioned your stuff quite often throughout the different podcasts that we've had when we start getting into frequencies and different binaural beats and different tones and different things like that. So you definitely on the forefront of my mind. We've had those conversations. So absolutely.
Yeah. And I want to share how we met because it's instrumental in why we feel like you are so important. Oh yeah, pun intended. Pun intended. Of why you are so important to not only us but the world, I think, and the work that you're doing. But Ian used to live in the Charleston vicinity here in South Carolina, and we went to one of he was putting on a sound bath, I guess, for lack of a better word, with a guy who also was doing mantras. And this little beautiful cottage at Daniel Island, and we go in there, and this was very early on our journey, 2015, I think, probably.
Yeah.
And so we were just touching all of this sort of stuff, so it was kind of out of our realm. We go in there, it was quite small, maybe, 10 or 15 people, and it was just a beautiful, transformative experience with the mantras and the music, and there was a light show in there as well, and it was just amazing. Now, I have not been traditionally one who senses energy as much as my husband, and so when we got back in the car, he was like, "Oh my God!" He I don't know. You went somewhere, some kind of really.
We briefly talked about it at the end, and we as we chatted and we connected more later on. But it was very transformative for me because that's the first time that I've been listening to different genres of music, mainly instrumental, all of my life. But this is the first time that I was actually able to, in essence, have somewhat of an out-of-body experience where I could just allow the vibration of the music just to take me away. And not that I had a classical out-of-the-body experience, but I knew I could feel that separation taking place, and I just allowed myself to be immersed in that. And from that point forward, I realized that this is something I need to, have in my life, quote unquote. And it was instrumental for me because at that point I was going through my what would you call it? My greater educational process, my undergrad and my graduate program, and it was your music that. When I would sit and I would study and I would do my homework, I'd go to Starbucks, put my headphones on, put you up on my computer, and I could hammer out papers like there was no tomorrow.
Wow.
I mean, I would just lose myself in that music, and I could just focus and it was like words were just flowing. It was like I need me
some of that,
right? and that's what got me through, my undergrad and then into my graduate program and out. So and even to this day when I know when my body needs it. So I've got many of your albums from the past and a lot of your old work, and I still utilize a lot of that. So it is transformative. It is self-revealing too, because it does reveal a lot within yourself of how you are, how your frequency connects to what you're providing as far as through the frequency, how your body actually resonates with those frequencies.
So now that we've given a teaser about all of
yes, I had to say that to say.
Let's let Ian tell the audience in your words what it is that you do before we delve into your background.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, so I took the term very early on, calling myself a sound alchemist, because I didn't really want to be considered a healer, because I felt like a lot of the people that I looked up to that were healers, they had a lot of expansive knowledge and information about a lot of things that I was not, I was just developing, getting started into that stuff. And so for me, music was a huge part of my life, most of my life. My dad was a musician. And then I started playing music when I was about 17. And so, first band was a punk rock band, and then just started getting into like heavy metal, and then got into cover bands and just expanding. And so it's just something that was always with me. But what I noticed that when I started really getting into like binaural beats and pure tones and all of these, I know we're going to talk about that later, but when I got into all of these, what I would say more of a healing or transformative music, and tonal based music, instead of just melody and, making things for entertainment value. But when I started getting into that music, I started seeing these huge changes in myself. And so it made me want to go deeper, just like you were saying, coming to that event made you want to say, hey, I need this in my life. I want to go deeper. So it was very similar, but it was just, instead of, this was the way I was doing music before, I'm going to go explore this new realm of music and frequency. And when I started doing that, it was just like there was no coming back. It was like once I started experiencing the feelings in the body, I was all in. So I started calling myself a sound alchemist, because I didn't really have a term to describe what I was doing, and started really working with myself. And it's something that created massive transformation and healing in my body. And then was able, lucky enough to start a company and to start really having people around me to see the changes in myself that allowed me to start my company. And it really started off as an experiment, let's see what this stuff can do. And then just, growing and growing and evolving in that process over the last 9 years, it's really just got to a point where I feel very comfortable playing in that channel, that flow state of working with the music, where I know that it's communicating through me, and it's not really, I'm helping to steer the ship, but it's really something beyond me. And I think by that terminology, that recognition or that realization, the terminology needs to change, but I'm not exactly sure what that's going to go to, like what you could really call that. So what I really focused on was the development of the music to really help people understand the difference. And that's why I trademarked frequency-minded music, to really try to set this apart and let people entertain it and explore it in a way that's different than just going to a concert or something of that nature. So started a sound company, I call it a unique sound healing company called Listening to Smile. So
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
And so in terms of your background, you said your dad was a musician, and then you picked up music around age 17. But earlier than that, was there any experience that you had that would have allowed you to be more open to this sort of metaphysical or spiritual or holistic understanding that you came into later on?
I think what's interesting is I would always tell people that my dad was kind of a closet spirit person, like he was not really open about it, but he would talk about certain things just differently. And it reminds me very much of the movie Field of Dreams, how it's a spiritual movie, but kind of not really. It's kind of like, that's kind of the way my dad was, it's kind of like that kind of vibe. And so I think it was always present because of that. And then my mom was very rooted in like Christianity and very spiritual in that way. So I had these foundations that were kind of there, but my uncle was really into Drumbelow Melchizedek, and he was into all the ascended masters, and he would constantly be bringing that information to our family, even though my family thought, like, I don't know, this is a little weird, right? But it's like, so more of that kept flooding in. And I would say probably in my mid 20s, he started buying books for me and sending those books to me, Saint Germain, the Threefold Flame, and like the Ascended Masters, and got me like the Himalayan Master books, and just really started exploring that. And so I think that was really the foundation. Was I got into the Monroe Institute because of him. So that was really my first exposure to like sound healing in any form or fashion, was the binaural beats with the Monroe Institute, and all of that came from my uncle. So I think that was a very strong influence on getting that started.
Was that on your maternal side, or was the uncle on the maternal?
My mom's brother. Yeah.
Really? I bet she was thrilled about that.
Well, I find it interesting because, like, people can bring you books, like, and say, I think, you should pay attention to this, you should read this. But the thing is, you actually read it. Like, I give my son lots of interesting things, I think, and I've stopped doing it because he won't pick it up. He's like, yeah, that's nice. And, so were you like hungering for it? Like going, yeah, give me the next one, and having conversations? Or?
Well, what's interesting is I remember him sharing stuff with me, and I would be so excited to talk about it and share it with other people. And it was exactly like what you're saying. And I asked my uncle, and see, this is another mentor thing with him, is I said, I'm so excited to share this, and I'll tell people stories. And I said, now I just feel like I'm just wasting my time. And I said, what do you do to share this with people? And and he said, well, I tell people I read a good book once. And then he's like, I just leave it at that. And if they ask me what book it is, he's like, that's your person to explain it to. Right. And so he was saying that they actually put forth the effort. And he said, then if they don't, then you probably know they're just not interested, and you don't have to waste your time or sound like a fool, a complete idiot, someone just spouting off stuff that they don't really care to, dive into, or just have no concept, of to move forward with it. So I thought that was really helpful. I still use that to this day.
Very sage guy.
That's a great little nugget for, how to kind of handle those situations. And because we have that, many people say, well, how do you bring up these subjects to people? Well, it's not, you don't bring it up to them. You let them open the door first, right?
Yeah.
So it's finding those little avenues to let them open the door first. Yeah.
That's wonderful. You brought up binaural beats, and I think maybe a lot of people have heard of it, but tell us what that is exactly.
Yeah. So if you're wearing a set of headphones, a binaural beat is just really splitting up two different tones, so two different frequencies. So if I was, let's say on my left ear, I had 100 hertz, and on my right ear, I had 104. So the difference creates this wobble, and that's where the word beat comes from in binaural beat. So it's like it creates this almost like whoa, 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 whoa. So it has this, repetitive rhythm that people have dubbed beat. And so the binaural just means two. And so you have two different tones that create a wobble because they're just not in, alignment. If they were both 100 hertz, you wouldn't really be able to tell any difference. When you put that 4 hertz difference, it creates this dissonant between the two ears. It creates this wobble, and it's almost they'll call it an illusion, right? So it's not really taking place in the way that it would, like if you listen to it on a speaker system, it's not going to sound exactly the same that it does when you have the headphones on. So what's interesting about it is they found that the brain falls into, the brain has what they call a frequency follow response. And so basically, if you play a tone to the brain over a period of about 7 to 10 minutes, it will fall in alignment with that tone. It's almost like it's setting a mimic response, right? Mm-hmm. And so what's interesting is I believe, this is my opinion, is I believe that our brains are set up that way because the earth has an electromagnetic pulse, and we are supposed to be in tune with that. So our beings are made to resonate with these resonant frequencies. So, but there also, I believe the creator had another intention where we can take frequencies as medicine and introduce them where there is, where there's not alignment. You can create alignment through these frequency follow responses. So with that being said, you can change a person's brainwave state. So if someone was hyper anxious or, having a lot of depression, you could take like a theta brainwave state. And with practitioners that, are trained, you're talking psychology, hypnotherapy, all of these different modalities that you can combine, even life coaches, if you have a good life coach that gives a lot of positive affirmations and declarative statements, it will really help to reprogram the brain. The theta brainwave state is what we hit just before REM sleep. It's a very relaxed state, and it's a state where you're really highly it's a reprogrammable state of mind where you can get in and create a lot of disruption of patterns, addictions, pain, a lot of things that you can reprogram in that state of the theta brainwave state. So a lot of life coaches, hypnotherapists, a lot of people like that love binaural beats because it's a really great, there's science so it's one of the few things in sound healing that's actually clinically proven on multiple instances. So that's really cool. And then the other thing is that a lot of people find benefit in it. Now, what I'm doing, I have dubbed enhanced binaural beats. And the reason I do that is because what's unique with my process is that I customize and personalize the process of binaural beats. So like when I'm working with a client, and each person is going to be into different music, different speeds and tempos, beats per minute. There's going to be people who are into more music and want the binaural beats, merged into something that's like pop or folk or something that has melody and lyrics, and they want it, and as a subliminal, feel to it. And then there's other people who are almost like, I would say, the plant medicine approach, who are like, turn it up, baby, like give me all the amplitude, I want to feel it.
That's me.
And yeah, and I think that's me too. And I think that, so what's interesting is that you can start with a person, like if you guys were to go back to 2015 and look at yourselves, like we time travel back there, and you look at yourself then to where you are now, and then we fast forward another 10, 15 years, you guys are looking at different, fully functioning different versions of yourself. And so how can a binaural beat work with you for 10 years? It's just not, if this doesn't make sense. So you evolve, the music and audio needs to evolve with you. And so that means that sometimes we're going to turn it up or have a higher amplitude. There's going to be other stereo imaging things that we'll mess with based on how you start. What I tell people, and it's hard to put all this into a short statement, but what I'm trying to say is, when people work with binaural beats and pure tones, and they're working with that as medicine, they'll go out in nature and say, I hear more birds, I hear more engine hums, I hear the trees rustling in the breeze, I'm hearing more sounds. Is it changing my hearing? And I say, no, it is, you can say that, but I would say what is happening is a spiritual awakening. Your awareness and your consciousness is expanding. And so now you're able to take in more things and connect more dots, and the sound palette is expanding, and that in turn is helping you to, perceive things and have different perspectives. And so for me, binaural beats are a very, very powerful tool, but I think that it needs to be a customized, personalized process, because you'll hear people say, oh man, I love binaural beats. They worked for a while, but no, they're not really doing very much. And then you have other people like, they never worked for me, and it's just, I believe that people just need it dialed in, tuned in to where they can actually go deep with it, and then have that feedback and say, this track is really working with me. And it's like, okay, let's look at what we created here that's really having an effect on you in a powerful way. And let's double down on that. Let's go, and it could be everything from the instruments that are used, the beats per minute. It could be the volume of the binaural compared to the music. It could be the stereo imaging. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. But basically, I think they're one of the most powerful tools in sound healing for real breakthrough and change, not only on conscious level, but also like the physical relation of the mind and the body, that connection, the mind-body connection. So.
Can I?
Yes, go for it.
I'm curious because and I'm bringing this up because there's a lot of people who, maybe not Allison, but a lot of other people who get on TikTok, and we always bring this up, and a big trend they'll play just like this little clip of the sound coming from one side and swooshing around to the other.
Yes, I wanted to ask about that.
Like what they call 8D music.
Yeah.
Yes, talk to us about that. That is unbelievable experience.
Yeah,
imaging.
but see, for me, like, it's like some people, it bothers them. I know for me with my ADD, like brain, it's so soothing. Like, it is so wonderful. So I'm just wondering, is that the same thing as binaural beats, or is there something else going on there?
So this is
Are
so
you-
funny. This is so funny because Fallon and I talk about this because I said that it's just like, where's it going to stop? It's like, you got 8D, bro. I got 12D. It's like, how far are we going with this, right?
Going to
And
11.
but what's interesting is there's all these new mixing options that are available because of surround sound. Like you had THX, I believe is what it was, and now they've come out with another version of this where they're saying that musicians can mix on like 144 different channels, like because there's so many speakers in the theater, right, that each speaker has its own mix of like what you're putting in that speaker. So now musicians are starting to take those surround sound options and put them, to use, which is a cool technology. I feel like that panning is highly effective. Like if you're taking frequencies and you're going through a sweeping pattern of like, you take like a keyboard, let's say, and then you go from like 100 hertz and you bring the filter up, to 1,000 hertz and then back down to like 500. It's like this, it gives this swooshing, like a, kind of that kind of feel.
So it's not.
And so I think it's yeah, and you can use the left and right. They'll call it panning. So it's left speaker, right speaker, and it goes back and forth between the speakers.
Yep.
So when you're panning, you can also do the frequency sweep where it's hitting a lot of different frequencies and coming back just like the speakers are panning. So when you do that in conjunction together, it's a very powerful effect, and it's something that really grabs your attention, and it also can help you visualize, like your visualizations can come to life because this frequency sweep has kind of amplified or elevated that know
So my brain's cooking here right now with theories. So we know that the human brain produces DMT or a variant of DMT. Is there a way through this frequency method or any combination of mixing and whatever to induce that state without having to use psychedelics? I mean, because I would surmise that in the past, ancient cultures that had toning or these particular cave structures that had certain frequencies to them when they would go in and chant and tone, they would induce that DMT state to enter into an altered reality.
Yeah. So I believe that breathwork and humming, right? So you have breathwork, toning, and humming, and I think humming is one of the most powerful things. So like when I have clients, one of the things I like to do is say, they're like, I'm not a musician. I'm like, you don't have to be. I just want you to get as close. Yeah, this tone is just a pure tone. Boo. Yep. I want you to hum as close as you can and to be in unison with this tone for this 10 minutes. You can take breath, pauses to breathe and then come back with your breath. And what people will say is that the tone, they're like, the music is changing. I'm like, it's not changing. It's like, and so they'll start getting these visuals, and I'm telling them that I believe that when you're humming, especially when you're working with your tongue and your mouth, the roof of your mouth, and you're doing different breathing techniques with the humming, there's different techniques that you can do in conjunction with the frequency music that will definitely light up. You'll feel this energy. You feel your crown will light up very often. You'll feel this third eye, pineal really come to life. And people will say, well, I feel like this area is vibrating. And I'm like, it's coming back online because this, and I talk about like, everything from fluoride to chemicals and things that we're eating and processing in our environment that are really numbing out and these things. And people will say, well, why would they do that? And I'm like, because they want to cut you off from spiritual, because then you're a better follower, right? So I think like definitely there's a way that you can activate through a lot, different modalities, but one of the ones I find most effective is to be in, like, let's say we pick the heart chakra or I pick the third eye, whatever tone we're working with, right? I really like to use pure tones, no melodies, no music, just work with the tone and the hum. And when you do those in conjunction, it's super powerful for, awakening and rebooting those different targets that you're focusing on.
Now, initially, Robert Monroe used binaural beats for out-of-body experiences, correct?
Yes.
Tell me about how that worked. And in his case, was he able to use the same binaural beats and have the same experience for everybody? Because as far as I understand, everybody that came in got the same kind of thing.
Yeah, the gateway journey or experience, I can't remember what they called it, but that whole thing started off as an experiment with the CIA. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. But
tell our audience in case they're not.
Yeah, so they tried to create super soldiers, psychic warriors that could remote view and do these outer body experiences to gain intelligence on foreign, bases and soil, and find out what was going on. And if you're interested, I highly suggest there's a documentary on Amazon called Third Eye Spies. Oh. It's really interesting documentary about remote viewing and stuff like that. But yeah, so basically that started, and they, there's through the Freedom of Information Act, there's a document that you can get from the U.S. military basically saying this works. Like they were able to remote view, they were able to have outer body experiences that they were able to prove. And some of the things that I remember is that they would have two soldiers in two different countries from American bases, and they would be doing this experiment with the music. While they were listening to the music, they would try to get them to communicate, and they were able to draw shapes back and forth and exchange words back and forth. And it's really interesting stuff, right? So then that grew into them taking it into the private sector, and at the Monroe Institute, bringing people into these experiences for them to connect with loved ones on the other side, have outer body experiences, kind of travel. And if you get into any of his books, like Journeys Out of the Body, the Monroe books, they're just really fascinating when he writes the accounts of like things that he experienced. And all of this, from as far as I know, comes through this technology that they developed with the binaural beats. And they were really the first ones to pioneer that process. But I know that there was a lot, they had the gateway process, but I know they developed a lot of other things as they were, moving. They developed it a little deeper and have different tweaks or target focuses with those, binaurals that they're doing. So
that is fascinating, right? All the things that the government really knows. And,
yeah.
I mean, people want to call this woo-woo, but it's not, as your friend says, it's true.
It's true.
It's true, exactly.
You mentioned something about our own vibration and that of the earth. Now, you're referring to the Schumann resonance, is that correct?
Yeah, the 7.83 that spikes up to 100 or 150.
So tell us about that. What does the audience need to know about that and the fluctuation and so forth?
Well, the studies that they did, they show that when they take that frequency away from people, like when they would put them in confined boxes where it cuts off the signal and like basically cuts them off from the earth, they would have these mental meltdowns, like where people would just not last very long without that stimulation. And they could even leave the Schumann and turn off all lights and make them in darkness, and they would still be okay comparative to the signal being cut off. Wow. Like where there was nothing, like a Faraday cage, where it was like they were unable to experience any of the frequency of the earth. And so they started also, I noticed that on the space station, there's a lot of talk about the astronauts losing connection to the earth and like how
yes.
That's right. We're all on the same wave here.
Yeah. And so I know that a lot of times, from what I understand, NASA will put like crickets and different bird sounds in headphones for the astronauts to listen to help ground them in that frequency. And I remember one of the most interesting things. I was doing an event at Carnegie Mellon University. It was like we had a table set up, and it was like at this alumni weekend, and we had a table, and there was a bunch of other vendors there. And one of the professors came up to me, and he said, "Man, this is really interesting what you're doing here." He said, "Have you ever thought about how the birds usher in spring?" And he was saying, and so I was like, that's interesting. And I remember around that same time, there was a photographer that took a picture of a bird in the early morning, and you could see the breath of the bird when it was singing. So it like caught the cymatics. Wow. And it was like this swirl with all these complex patterns. Yeah. And it was just really interesting because when you think of frequency, I think of, there's so much here, guys, but basically when I think of frequencies that affect the body, I'm talking 400 hertz and below. When I'm physical body frequencies that really create change on a cellular level and energetic level. But when I think consciousness level, it's much, much higher frequencies that you're dealing with that are really working with our brains and our bodies in a different way, that are sometimes above the human hearing range, that we're talking about. So what's interesting is to think about how high pitch the frequency of the bird calls are, and to think about how, when they come around, usually you see birds in the mornings, they're starting their songs and chirping. And it's like, oh, well, birds are coming back. When you're in the north and it's like the birds are coming back towards that time and you're like, all right, spring's going to be here soon. And then you start thinking like, oh, maybe they are helping the grass grow and the buds open and, all these different things. And then I found this company called Sonic Bloom, which is a guy, 20, 30 years ago that created a technology that helped corn grow based off of frequency. And from what I understand, the story was he started playing music to the fields and like doing these frequencies to his corn. And all the farmers were making fun of him, like, man, you've lost it, dude. Like, and then they started seeing how high his corn was growing, like 12, 13, 14 feet high. And they're like, now what were you doing again? Like, what, how was that happening? So, yeah, so it's definitely, it's very interesting stuff. It's just really cool.
Yeah. I was gonna. We're starting to talk about plants, and it's interesting as I was walking from where we're recording here in the treehouse back to the house. I've got a lot of plants outside. I've got everything from dragon fruit to pineapples to limes and lemons, and I've got all kinds of stuff growing. But what struck me, and it struck me as I'm walking into the house just now, or just before this recording. I've got a wind chime that sits right next to my pool, and it's got just this beautiful melody. And I stopped for a moment. I'm like, I wonder how much that actually affects my plants.
Yeah,
it does. I think it does, right? Because they get to listen to that vibration all day long as the wind is gently blowing. The tones, just like if we sit up here and we listen to a sound bowl or a handpan or some just melodic sound, there doesn't have to be a melody to it, just the tone and how it puts you into a relaxed state here too.
Yeah.
Well, there's so much here because earlier you talked about this resonance of our body resonating with the frequency and coming into a harmonic with it, right? And so I wrote about that in The Journey Within, about how like two washing machines. If you set two washing machines together, this is physics. This is not woo-woo again. And they're eventually going to come into harmony in the way that they sound oscillate is the word, right? Mm-hmm. And so we do that with crystals as well. We can come into harmony with the frequency of the crystal. So the point is that everything in our reality is a frequency. Our
based
body,
on a frequency, yeah.
The chair that you're sitting in, everything. And so you can harmonize. You're harmonizing with the person that's standing next to you in the grocery store. So everything is affecting you on this level. And you also talked about the different frequencies, 400 and below being helpful physically, and then the higher ones for conscious building. But Rife was onto that, right? The Rife machine, where basically there is a frequency of every single disorder, every single disease, and there is a counteracting frequency that will bring that into neutrality and basically neutralize that disorder. Tell me about that.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is there would be, in my opinion, there would be no modern day sound healing without Royal Raymond Rife. Like, he really was the kind of godfather of like bringing this knowledge to people to that degree. And it was an accident, like, right. So from what I understand, he built his microscope and was really excited about being able, because at that time, the microscope he had built was like 10, 20 times what the electron microscope was. And that was still, invented after he had come up with this, his microscope. And we'll never really know how good that microscope was because it was dismantled and we have pictures of it, but no one's been able to really replicate what he made. And from what I understand, it was pretty advanced and for its time. But
remind us who and why it was dismantled.
Yeah, well, I
don't know. That'd be accepted on YT. I don't know.
Say it covertly.
Yeah, it basically. So there, from what I understand, this is and I could be. Don't quote me on every single thing, but from what I understand, there was a friend that was in the steel business that knew Royal, and basically he was having all these problems where they would make these steel beams and then they would have all these defective, ones that would get sent back. So he was losing a lot of money. So Royal said, I have this technique. I can show you how to make the beam strong every time and not have defects. And so the guy said to him, well, if you can do that, I'll do pretty much anything that you want, And so he said, well, what I need is a laboratory. I need, equipment. I need a place to. So the guy basically, so he said, yeah, you're on. I'll do whatever you do. So he basically showed him the technique that from that point forward, it created these strong beams, and then it saved the guy a lot of money. So he opened up one of his places on the grounds where the steel mill was, basically gave him a whole building, equipped it, built out all the stuff that he wanted, gave him everything he needed. So he built this something further along than the electron microscope before the electron microscope. And he started experimenting with backlighting under the slides. So he was looking at germs, viruses, bacteria, and he was looking with this light, and he started experimenting with different colors of light. And so what he found was that there was certain viruses that the whole virus would light up when a certain color hit the virus. So he was like, man, so this is the resonant frequency for this. And so he said, well, if there's a light frequency, there's got to be a sound frequency. So that's what made him start exploring. It wasn't even something that he was doing, but because of that, he was so curious, he started experimenting. And when he did experiment, from what I understand, it was a lot of experimentation, but one day he got, his machine right, the Rife machine that he had built, and it exploded the outer membrane of the virus. And so then it was unable to replicate or reproduce or do anything, but it left all the other cells on the blood sample. It left all the other cells alone, and it wasn't causing any harm. So he started exploring more and more, and he started documenting in books, all these different viruses, bacterias. I mean, even the coronavirus was studied by Royal Raymond Rife. So you can go back and look at his frequencies to end that. So it's like pretty much anything you can think of, hundreds and hundreds of things were documented by him in his journals. And so one of the things in a lot of the books that I read about him, I started reading about his use of multiple frequencies, using multiple sources and multiple frequencies to target certain viruses or to work with people in a different way. And so it's what led me down taking the enhanced binaural beats. What I'm doing is I'm basically taking a binaural beat, and then I'm using pure tone frequencies, sometimes 2 and 3 different frequencies, and I'm putting them on top of the binaural as a carrier frequency. So I'm working with a base foundation of like theta pattern with the binaural, but I'm subtly putting in these 2 or 3 other pure tones that are then able to be delivered in a more powerful way because they're on the wave or riding this other frequency. And then also the person is getting the effects of the binaural in the left and right hemisphere. And then the stereo imaging that I'm putting in there, you're moving these different pure tones. And if you look at music as in a general, like if you look at European music or African music compared to American music, they've started studying the brain where different parts of the brain are lighting up with different time signatures, different beats per minute, different instruments. So like for me, when you're working with a client, you're really getting to know the types of beats per minute, the time signatures, the things that they're really working with and affecting their body and brain in a powerful way. And then you're taking this to the next step by creating this enhanced binaural beat and customizing this program for them that is then targeting the exact thing that they're going for. And so it's very closely related from just studying like Wilhelm Reich, if you guys are familiar with him, and then also Royal Raymond Rife, and then Buckminster Fuller, Tesla. I mean, there's just so many different people. And then what I've tried to do is also incorporate kind of the theories and philosophies of like, everyone from Joe Dispenza, Bruce Lipton, Greg Braden, all of those guys, where you're kind of bridging science and spirituality. I've tried to take that same approach with the music that I'm creating. So
isn't that amazing? Gosh,
that's
like I said,
a lot to hold in that space.
Oh, yeah.
Creations.
Yeah.
Like,
he's a fountain of, you've mentioned pure tones a lot.
yeah.
And I know there's this other word that's thrown out there, solfeggio. Can you tell us where that fits in?
So the solfeggio is a scale, and to play the notes and the frequency, and also a lot of people will say it's related to, well, okay, Dr. Leonard Horowitz, he wrote a book called The Book of 528. He was really the first person that brought solfeggio to the mainstream awareness and consciousness. He's got tons of books. Um, he I'll just say this. I'm not the biggest fan of how he talks to people. Like, it's just not my favorite thing to see. But I think he is a wealth of knowledge. And I think the books he writes are fantastic. Like, there's so much information in there. But I also like he talks down about 432 and the tuning of that, and he's pro 528, and you've got people who are pro 432 and they talk out against 528. What I find, and the reason I'm saying this to make my opinion known, is that frequency is such an exploration, experiential kind of experiment with each person, and like what affects you today may not be what affects you tomorrow. And so the more that you can empower yourself with knowledge and have the curiosity to explore, you're going to find like you're peeling layer after layer of the onion. And sound can be such a powerful tool to help in so many ways, but it's just having the willingness and the curiosity to explore. Nothing that you're going to get into is going to hurt you. There might be things that feel cringy, like, oh, I don't really like this. And that might be exactly what you need. So it's something that, you have to kind of explore a little bit. But I think it takes one of my friends is a poet, and he wrote a book called I Need Open-Hearted, Intelligent Listeners. That's what is like the name of his album, right? And I just thought that was so funny, because I think that's what really everyone needs. And like people will constantly come to me like, dude, do you believe in flat earths? Do you think about this? Do you think about that? And I'm like, I've never been in space. I don't know. So I really don't know. I can't say they're dumb or they don't know what they're talking about, because who knows? I was like, we thought a lot of things. And when we look back at history, we see how much we've been lied to about pretty much every single subject that we've ever learned has been a lie for the most part, or told in a way that really takes out a lot of the truth of, the situation. So my point is, I think that's all of across the board. Like for me to get to a place where I've learned so much and to have so much healing in my life through this modality, I had to really have an open mind and just say, that's interesting. I don't know. I'll have to explore that. I'll have to check this out more, and just and really, and then start having that inner knowledge where you're like, this resonates with me. This feels good. This feels grounded. And it's like that way I learned to kind of tune out the noise of other people's opinions. But I also like to hear other people's opinions, because I'm like, well, why do you feel that way? What brought you to that conclusion? And it's like, I think I'm just kind of one of those people that's like an observer and like recording everything and kind of taking it in the process of my creation,
Beautiful, because we've talked about discernment on this show a lot.
Yes.
And that's what it's about, is what resonates with you. There's not necessarily a right or wrong. And investigating open-minded, being open-minded in your investigation.
Well, I remember falling in love with solfeggio, frequencies and stuff. And there was this one, YouTube video that like, it takes you through all of them. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so lovely and wonderful. And so I started researching a little bit more, and for whatever reason, I came across a bunch of solfeggio haters. Yeah. And like, they were just tearing it apart, and I'm going, is this wrong? Is this, like, what's, like, is it not anything, and it kind of colored me for a little bit, and then I was just like, you know what, I'm enjoying this. Why am I listening to this? Yeah, right. It's, so like, I'm totally into all those tunes. Like when I'm doing work, I something like, there's certain things that I recognize that, I don't want words. I don't want just a certain kind, like piano music doesn't work for me, but other tones do. But it's this rumbling that feels almost like a hum, and that settles me. It's
what's interesting is there's a show on Netflix called, The Umbrella Academy.
Yes.
And on that show, it deals a lot with like time travel and a lot of different things. But there's a girl on that show that had the ability to amplify sound. And it was like one of her superpower as a superhero. And what I found interesting is she could take the sound of a raindrop and then amplify that and like push sound waves to like push someone across the room like that was trying to hurt her, right? And so I was thinking, like, man, what a perfect analogy for sound modality. Because honestly, the sound, like people will say, so I can just listen to this and it's going to heal me. And I'll say, no, that's not how it works, right? So they're saying, well, what is it? And I said, this is your friend, right? So the sound healing frequency is your friend. It comes into the room and it tells you, I say, have you ever been angry or been depressed and then you had a happy friend like, hey man, what's going on? Like, you okay? You feeling all right? And I was like, that's this frequency. Okay. That's what it's doing. And it's like, hey, do you remember what it's like to be in alignment? Hey, do you remember what it's like to be happy? Do you remember what it's like to feel relaxed? And your body's like, oh yeah, I think I remember that. And the longer exposure, it's like you can't resist it. Like if you have a friend who, whether it's happy or sad, right? If I'm in a good mood and someone comes in and they've had a horrible day, their car broke down, their bank account's empty, they've had just, their girlfriend broke up with them, they're going to be in this heavy, dense energy. And if I spend time and allow that to seep into my world, it's going to start bringing me down to that level because that is that frequency follow response, right?
Yep.
And there are people who have trained themselves to be protected and to have walls, but it doesn't matter. The longer you spend in that time, in that space with that person, it will affect you, right? That's just the nature of frequency. But if I have a happy friend, it's like it can work the same way. So I think the discernment for me comes in to really getting aware of like what you're letting into your world, not just in friends, but media, books, movies, conversations, people's energies at the workplace, people's energies, and just in like you can go to the store and you can feel it. Like all of us, I'm sure, that are watching this are intuitive and, like HSPs, like highly sensitive people. And, we are strongly affected by other people's energies. We can feel it immediately most of the time. And so I think like just helping a person realize like part of the process is allowing and being open-minded to what this frequency is bringing into you. The next part of that phase is that you're setting the intention of what this session is going to do. And then that intention is naturally, it's something that's built into this process, natural, very divinely, is that intention is now going to amplify this frequency, and your body is going to utilize that frequency in whatever way you've set this intention. It doesn't matter if it's the third eye, it doesn't matter if it's the heart chakra frequency. I'm not saying that those things don't have an effect, but I'm telling you that your body and your mind and your intention are so powerful that you can take, just like the superhero in the Umbrella Academy, you can take this frequency and amplify it to this new manipulation of energy that is going to be healing for your body. Your body knows, and you know intuitively where it needs to go, how it needs to be used, all of those things. So it's like, I think there's, basic directions that we can help people get pointed in those directions. The next step is taking the responsibility of setting that intention and then being curious enough and open enough to explore where this goes with each one, because for each person, it'll be vastly different,
Right.
Wow.
Right. And same with Reiki. We've talked about this with our Reiki participants or clients, in that you don't necessarily have to touch a particular part of the body to have the energy flow there. It's your intention. So that's perfect. You mentioned the 528 and this disagreement between 528 and 432.
432.
But there's also a conspiracy theory about this
440.
universally accepted orchestral frequency that was changed at some point from 432 to 440 purposefully because humans don't resonate with 440 as well. And what do you know about that?
Yeah. Well, so there's a conspiracy to the conspiracy, right? So there's, there's,
Of course there is.
yeah. So there's musicians that, are all in music theory and music history, and they'll say it's all BS, that it's not true, this whole thing. But what I do know is that if you are a student of truth, right? Like and you look at World War II, and I think this is really important. I know this sounds so off the wall to be talking about, but basically there's been a lot of research and paper trails uncovered that have shown that the spies for the U.S. Army had got into some facilities that were built into mountains, when German was kind of, they were stepping away because they were getting beat in war, and Hitler had put a lot of money and got a lot of scientists working on research and development. And what they were doing is they were creating levitating, machinery. They were creating aircraft. They already had the rockets before everyone, right? The V2 rocket was the first thing that really caused damage in a way that most people have never seen. And then they invented the jet before anyone else had that technology. And so when you're talking propeller planes from America and the Allies fighting jet fighters, you're highly outmatched in speed and just, it's very different technology. Well, they were going a step further. They were getting into these levitation machines and machines that had far greater like turning ability and shifting ratio and speed and just everything. And they were developing lasers, and there was a lot of technology that was being developed at that time in these underground bases and mountain bases that they were doing. And the spies for the US were getting video and pictures of this, and they were basically saying, like, if you don't get over here and shut this down, the world is going to be taken over by these people. This is like 100 years advanced compared to what everyone else has, right? So if you get into the Vril Society, I'm sure you guys have heard about them, but they're a bunch of channelers that the socialites and the Nazi, the SS, the real, upper echelon of the officers were going to these socialite parties where everyone was like, sex and drugs and all this stuff. Well, at one of these parties, this woman with this long hair that she carried in a bag, like, came to this event, and she laid down and they rolled her hair out and put it out like antennas, and she was channeling in these messages. And so she claimed to have contact with these beings that were living in the earth, like in inner earth, and they were giving her these schematics. And so people were writing it down, and this general from the SS was at this party, and he said, we got to take this to the Fuhrer, we got to show him this whole thing. So they like amplified this and brought all of her people in, and basically were using these channelers to connect to these other beings that they were swapping technologies, like through channelings. And so supposedly what I understand is that's where these schematics came for some of these machines that they were building, and they were trading technology like interdimensionally, right? Which is like really crazy to think about. So people are like, Ian, you're crazy, you've lost your mind. And I was like, well, just have an open mind for once and just listen to this. So at the same time, they were developing these mind control techniques where they got into fluoridizing the water, fluoridating the water, and then also other things because they were wanting to create docile population for following. And if you look, the Nazi Party is one of the fastest rising parties, took political power in the history of the planet. It's just like overnight, it was like, boom, here it is. And so what's interesting is the Henry Ford Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation thought this was highly interesting. So they started really taking pages out of the playbook of how fast they rose to power, all the things that they were doing, and they started using their money to influence the educational system, all kinds of different systems here in the U.S. And one of the things that they did was they changed the tuning in the schools, and they started putting music programs into the school and paying for that education at the same time as expanding a whole lot of other things. And they really just hijacked the educational system through money, donations, and all of the things, right? So what's interesting is at the same time of changing the music, they changed the educational template and format so that they were creating followers. And they said, we don't want unique thinkers. We don't care. We want people to work on the assembly lines. We want people to be uniform and just conform. And that was the whole purpose of what they laid out in that template. And so when you look at that, and you hear all this information and you look back, like Project Paperclip, which is a documentation that shows we stole all of the scientists and created NASA and all these other programs, which then ended up becoming, infiltration of, the Nazi philosophy into the upper echelon of our military industrial complex, and it created the deep state. They started operating in secret. Anyways, well, you don't have to go there. But my point is,
No, but
is
that's
that
fascinating. There's like,
yeah. But my point is that they shifted the tuning of the music, and when you look at the research, especially in the book 528 that Dr. Leonard Horowitz put out, they call it the devil's interval. It's the intervals between the notes on the scale of 440. When you start looking at it, it's a dissident frequency to plants, humans, and animals. And on a cellular level, it stagnates and stunts growth. And so it's just such a interesting thing to think about. And then you start thinking about the dumbing down of the music industry. Like when you think of lyrics from like Bob Dylan, James Taylor, Joni Mitchell, and then you start looking at like rock bands, then progressive rock, and it's like, like even like Frank Zappa, you have music that shocks you and moves you, and like you don't know where it's going next, and it's highly creative. It's stimulating you to be creative and to think of like all these different possibilities and opportunities. When you think of music today, it's a template. It's verse, chorus, bridge, verse, chorus, end, and it's like everyone sounds the same, everyone's doing the same thing. There's no expansion in that. It's stagnation. If it was a pond, it would have algae and just completely grown over and just stagnant. That's the way the music industry is this like today. And a lot of the lyrics are dumbed down to be about sex and drugs and alcohol and partying and heartache and loss. There's not empowerment. It's very rare that you get a song that's hopeful and empowering and inspiring. And then when we do get it, so many people are like, man, this is a great song. And it's like, that's the way all songs should be, right? It's like, it should all be like this, inspiring you. And so basically I just feel that 440 is a very stagnant energy. And people say, well, do you ever listen to, and I said, man, I still love the Beatles. I still love music, but I just don't spend a majority of my time there. Right. I listen to those things and I take them in for what they are. And the other thing to remember is that 440, like if you go to a yoga studio and you see the planetary gongs, planetary frequencies are in 440. They're not a sacred tuning like 432 or 444. These are all based off of mathematical equations that a mathematician, there's a book called The Cosmic Octave, I think is the name of it. And I think his name was Hans. I'm trying to remember. I've read so many books, but I think his name was Hans. Great. And he took the Pythagoras algorithm of basically calculating. You can take the measurements of an object and create the frequency of what that object will be based off of this Pythagoras algorithm. And this mathematician did this and created. He took the orbital patterns and the circumference and all of the measurements of the planets and created what the frequency would be for each planet. But they're in standard tune. There's a lot of Himalayan bowls and sound bowls that are made in India that are using, 440 tuning, but they're still beneficial to people because what you're doing is you're disrupting this pre-programming that's going on with a person with sound. And then you're also helping them to find a new relaxation or a reset of the nervous system. So sound in all forms, in my opinion, can be powerful. But I think that for me, what I'm trying to get people to do with my work is to have variety. Like if you ate chicken every single day for the rest of your life, you're not getting the variety of nutrients and enzymes that you need, like adding fruit and vegetables and different meats and because your body stagnates, just like if the input stagnates, your body stagnates, your consciousness stagnates. I think we're made to have varieties of stimulations. And I think we're also made to stick with certain vibrations and stimulations. Like for instance, just because an intimate relationship is hard doesn't mean it's not a match. It means that there's something coming up here for you both to look at. Now, is this the right person to look at that with? That's the question. And it's like, just because a food is agitating you doesn't mean that you're never supposed to eat it. It means that there's something else. It's telling you, hey, look at this, pay attention, right? And so I think that that's what I'm trying to get people to realize, that consistency and variety is so powerful with frequency, vibration and therapy.
Wow. So much, so much. So if people who are listening really resonate with what you're saying and they want to connect with you, what sort of services do you offer out there now?
So, well, I'm really excited. So next month we're launching Frequency Minded magazine. So we're going to have, authors from all over the globe. We have 12 different countries we're working with holistic practitioners on. So we have a lot of people that are coming together to write for the magazine. It's going to be a blog, so each person that writes an article will also have a little 2 to 5 minute clip that goes with their article where they're kind of directly talking. It's a different format. So we're excited about that. And then we also started a record label for other frequency minded musicians to do what I'm doing. And so they're kind of getting a play from my playbook and kind of hopefully skipping the line of all the stuff I had to go through to get here. And then also we're starting a podcast to kind of field the between the magazine and the record label, where those people then have an outlet to share frequency, this type of information on a monthly basis. And so all of that will be coming out next month, on our website, listeningtosmile.com. And then the main focus of Listening to Smile is really creating opportunities for holistic practitioners to amplify the work they're already doing with our FMM, the frequency minded music. And we've created a licensing program that's highly unique that allows them to create their own white label products. And they can also create synergy across their whole business plan with frequency minded music and help brand their business in a different way. So we're talking music for podcasts, commercials, social media. They can create their own products. They can utilize it in live and in-person events as well as online events. They can create courses, they can create workshops. And so it's something that's it's really, there's nothing like it out there for this type of licensing right now. And I think that that's the main focus of what we do. But, everything from workplace wellness to personal frequency coaching to working with affiliates and members. So all of that information's on our website.
At listeningtosmile.com.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
beautiful. And I understand you have some pretty well-known clients, don't you?
Well, so we've worked with celebrity chef Pete Evans, who, he got a lot of press during COVID because he spoke out against COVID, and then they fired him from his network. But he had worked with like Martha Stewart and, been on her show 10 or 12 times. And so we worked with him. He started his own network, after that, which was really cool, the Evolve Network. So he's somebody we've worked with. We've worked with Paul Chek at the Chek Institute, and he has his own podcast, and a lot of people know him. He was, I think, the first personal trainer to Tony Robbins, worked with Kobe Bryant from the LA Lakers, Chicago Bulls. He wrote a strength training manual for the PGA Tour. So, a lot of people like that. And then we've just worked with some athletes, pro athletes, some people we can say, some people we can't say. We've worked with gold medal, Olympians that were for weightlifting. So there's a lot of interesting people have come across, our radar.
That's
really
fantastic.
cool.
Congratulations, Ian. It's amazing to think where all of us really have come in the 10 years since we met. And it's just a beautiful thing to see you progressing and evolving. And
You guys too. Yeah.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
well, we are so thankful that you came to talk about all of this. There's just so much here. And again, we may need to bring you back to talk about some more deep dive stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, one thing I was going to say, I'm bummed because I would love to talk about this, but maybe we do it in another podcast. But like the process of making the music monthly, I was telling Fallon, I was like, nobody ever really talks to me about that, because maybe it's just not, maybe a musician would like be more into like knowing that. But I think like it's, for me, the channeling that goes on, like this month, we just put out an album that's called Timeline Jump. And when I put it out, before anything happened with Trump or any of the tornadoes and all the different things that have been going on, I was telling people, I said, I just feel like this month is going to be weird. There's going to be a big shift event. And I put that out. And then like every single month, all the affiliates are like, dude, how are you doing this? Like, where are you getting this information? And I'm like, and I'm just like, it channel. And like, because I had a completely different name for this month's album for July. I can't even remember what it was, but I had made a completely different artwork, and I was just there and I got this download, and it's like, no, this isn't it. That's not what we're doing. And so it took me 3 or 4 days, and I kept saying like, man, it's just stressing me out. I don't know what I'm supposed, like, how am I supposed to finish this if I don't even know where this is going? And it was just like, boom, one day it was just like timeline jump, and it just like came direct. And so I was like, I started putting together the artwork, and it was like an astronaut, like in an astronaut suit, and then like one of those old 1800s air blimps, like and they were coexisting in the picture. And I was like, how does this make sense? And it's like timeline jump, bro. It's like, it's like, go ahead and just keep moving forward. And so I put it out, and all these people were just like, man, this album is so powerful. And it's like, so for me, the process is like, it's so fun, and people will say, man, great album. I'm like, yeah, it was pretty cool. It's like, because I'm a listener too, it's like, it's just coming through me. And so it just would be neat to talk about that process with you guys, because I think you guys would get that more than most places.
I think we definitely have to, we'll chat about it and see where we can maybe get you in again for that whole experience, because it does, that does dovetail into a lot of what our viewers understand as far as the channeling aspect, as far as the metaphysical aspect, and how to blend and bridge all of that together to produce something. That's, I think, the beauty in it for sure.
But channeling comes in so many different forms. So I'm really glad that you brought that up, because I think artists, musicians are very much a channel.
Absolutely.
And so it's about recognizing that in yourself and being open to that inspiration that comes through, and realizing it's not the same for everybody. So even if you're not a direct voice channel like Will is, does not mean that you're not having that flow, that you're in that flow of creation.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad you brought that up.
Perfect.
Cool. Yeah.
Anything else, guys, that we need to?
I mean, yes, but
I just want you back like in August or the beginning of September, so you can clue me in on what's going to happen like in September and October. No, in September and October when I'm out of town.
We need to pre-order October and November's album, probably.
Yes.
Right.
So at least we're ready for it energetically.
That is so funny.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Oh, that's going to be interesting. Wow.
It'll be fun.
Thanks so much,
cool.
Ian, for being with us.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much.
So much to our viewers for another exciting episode. Thank you for joining us. Please hit that thumbs up. Go ahead and subscribe, hit the notification bell, share away, do all of the things, and we will see you next time.
See y'all.
Bye.